16 months into the future. Campion told reporters as he sat on the couch in the apartment he shared with 4 other young Sunrise Movement activists in Northwest Washington, D.C. The 3-bedroom apartment in Washington's Columbia Heights neighborhood is one of a number of so-called campaign homes across the world where Sunrise Movement members relax and work together. Their mission is twofold: to attempt to persuade policymakers to move on one of the most serious problems facing society, and to create an army of young people to send a message. Discussion question: what is more sustainable, a house or an apartment? Bonus, and why?
Thank you so much, Angela. That was an excellent reading. I like how you kind of took time to enunciate each word, and that kind of helps everybody digest a lot of information really well. So I'm kind of changing up how the discussion questions work. For time, we really only have time for like 2 people to answer each one, and like 1 yes or no all person question. And if you're looking for a more casual discussion, we will get into that at the end of the meeting with an interesting opportunity that I thought of. But with that, is there anybody who would like to take a guess here, or perhaps you already know? All right. So we have Casey here saying that she would guess an apartment because the apartment takes up less space and some houses can be really big. So thank you so much, Efnon, for noting that down. And that is an excellent point, Casey. I see Ashley, your hand up there, and I see Tanvi too. So Tanvi, I will reserve you for the next 2-person question. But with that, Ashley, would you like to jump in the chat or just kind of speak out with your guess and or answer?
I think apartments are more sustainable because just like Casey said, they're smaller, so you don't need as many appliances as you would in a house.
That is an excellent point, Ashley, and both of you are on absolutely the right track. So while Afnan goes over that, I'll kind of share what I learned, and that was actually Ashley, Afnan, not Tanvi. But thank you so much. I mix up names all the time myself. So the reason that apartments tend to be more sustainable, and you both kind of hit on this with less space and fewer appliances, is that apartments are so much better when it comes to heating. When you heat an apartment, not only is there less space to heat, but it also heats up all of the other apartments around it, whereas with a house, all of that heat will be lost. So apartments are actually much more sustainable, whereas the kind of like traditional house is a bit less so. And is there anything that you would like to add, Ashley? I do see your hand up there.
I forgot to put it down, sorry.
Oh, good. I do that all the time. So with that, Angela, perhaps you could get into the rest of this section of our reading.
This tiny community is part of a much broader nationwide association whose participants are overwhelmingly young or 20 years old. The Sunrise Campaign has no organized membership, but its main leaders, a tiny group of activists in the mid-20s, estimate that 15,000 young people have taken part in in-person protests around the country, and that 80,000 have taken part in less overt actions such as emailing and contacting their representatives. As of this month, the organization has 290 independent, self-governing chapters of activists called hubs around the world. In November 2018, there were just 11. The 15,000 protesters who turned out to be in person have spent the past year filling the offices and hallways of the U.S. capitals, state houses, and Democratic National Committee meetings around the country, chanting at the top of their lungs. Their tactics are straight out of the repertoire of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. They also perform protest songs. They watch passively as police officers tie their hands behind their backs and push them into passive action trucks. Their eyes beg, they hold signs like those that say, "Youth are coming for you." Discussion.
Thank you very much, Angela. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You can go over the discussion.
Oh, okay. Do you have detailed plans for the future? Yes or no?
And I might kind of just like go over everybody on my screen. We really only have time for a yes or no answer. But again, we can get more into this very topic with another interesting announcement that I have at the end of our meeting. So with this, I'm just going to jump on you, Tanvi. Yes or no? Do you have detailed plans for the future? Sorry to pick on you. You're the first person on my screen.
No problem. Kind of. So for
Yeah. All right, thank you so much. And we can also have like a maybe category. Again, I'll have an interesting opportunity for us to get more into this at the end of the meeting. Who would iPhone be? Okay. Angela,
Sorry, that's me.
all good.
That's
Yeah.
all. His name's Ollie.
Ollie, okay, thank you so much.
And no, my answer is no.
I absolutely feel that. How about you, Angela?
My answer is also no.
Absolutely. And for the record, I would say that my answer is like, I have a vague answer, but I'd probably also say no for myself. How about you, Nishida? And if mics are a little bit of a thing, please feel free to like type in the chat. But with that, I will jump into it with you, Kat. Hey, that kind of rhymed.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I fixed it. No, I don't have plans.
All good, all good. How about you, Ashley?
Yes, I do have plans.
Heck yeah. Nice to you, Nishida. So we have Nishida and Ashley for yes. And how about you, Casey? Kind of. And we have Casey under kind of with plans and goals, but they aren't very detailed. That's kind of where I fall under myself. Like, I kind of know where I want to go, but I'm not really sure how that'll work out. And like, my plans from the past have changed so much, I don't even know if I'm still going to have those. Anyways, enough about me. How about you, Iman?
I'm kind of as well.
Heck yeah. How about you, Ethan?
Kind of. Yeah, I'm under the kind of tab.
Absolutely. And how about you, Afnan?
I've planned out everything.
That's actually really dope. I would love to hear like more about everybody's plans or like why people kind of don't have them, again, with an interesting announcement that I have at the end of the meeting. How about you, Nimra?
I'm not fully sure, but I would just say maybe.
I may be solid. And last but not least, what about you, Leon?
Not really.
Not really. And I guess I'll ask Lily, when you were our age, or perhaps even now, did you have like a thorough set of plans for the future that you like knew you were going to follow? Or were you like a little bit more of a maybe or less so?
No, I feel like I've just been very like organic. I say yes to things that suit and just I plan my week better than I plan my year, sort of thing.
I actually find myself in like almost exactly the same case. I wonder where I got that from. Anyways, with that, perhaps we could jump into the rest of category 1. And again, I'm so sorry that we didn't really have time to elaborate too much, but we really do within this hour want to be super respectful of your busy schedules. I just need to kind of like plow through it sometimes, which again, I keep saying will be addressed at the end of the meeting. So with that, Angela, would you be ready to finish off your discussion with the last little bit of one?
Yes. So the new climate resistance is young and varied, scared but loud. In a brief time, the assertive strategies of the Sunrise Campaign have brought about dramatic change, pushing climate change and the Green New Deal, their vision to address it, to become the defining topics of the 2020 election. This would be young voters have forced Democrats running for president to release serious comprehensive proposals to dramatically reduce U.S. fossil fuel emissions. These new college graduates are foregoing entry-level technical work that their colleagues have been willing to participate in full-time climate advocacy. All in the DC apartment is in their early to mid-20s. No one has a permanent plan other than to fight like heck and try to avoid climate change. Standard adult signs of getting a home, getting married, having children. That's 11 years, says housemate Lauren Monis, calculating how long it would have taken her in more ordinary conditions to complete all of them. 11 years have a different meaning for her and her friend. It marks the year 2030, the deadline set by the UN Intergovernmental Commission on Climate Change for countries across the world to dramatically curb their pollution or to experience the consequences of a climate crisis after average global temperatures of 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius have passed. Both of these consequences are already evident. Hurricane Dorian has caused destruction in the Bahamas, and wildfires are burning all over the world, from the Amazon to the Siberian forests and the western United States. It can even be felt closer to home. The day I interviewed the group at the beginning of September, it was a slumbering 96 degrees Fahrenheit in Washington, D.C., which is much higher than usual, a new high heat for that date. This year, the stakes are high. President Donald Trump's administration, a climate change denier, is doing all it can to bring down environmental protections.
So a few quick things I guess I will add. The article that I'm basing this off of was made in 2019. And I'm getting a message here. Absolutely. It was written in 2019. So Donald Trump lost the presidential election. So as an environmentalist, that is almost definitely a good thing. But he is still doing everything he can to kind of like take the United States down with him, according to an internal strategist. And the next administration is kind of saying that they've got a bunch of executive orders to deal about that. But with that, what is one way? And again, perhaps not Casey and Ashley, you had really, really good answers for the previous question, but just to give a few other people a chance to jump in. Is there anybody, or how can you think of that we can pressure Canadian politicians to meet targets like the Green New Deal? What are some ways that we can apply pressure to politicians in Canada? And feel free to raise your hand, throw up an emoji, or just jump right into it. I see, Ethan, that your hand is up, so feel free to jump into it. And I see also that Nimra's hand is up. So perhaps Afnan could note down Ethan and Nimra, and Ethan, you could just jump right into it.
Sure. So ways I think we can all pressure Canadian politicians is simply reaching out to their staff or emailing them, I think is a great way. That's always when I want to contact a politician, that's the best start. And they usually will have time to at least respond to your email, and potentially you could have, set up a meeting if you get enough people to email the politician. So definitely start small, emailing them, and then you can, share your views to hopefully create change.
That was an excellent point, Ethan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Afnan, for noting that down. And I'm really glad to see that like almost everybody throughout the 3 weeks we've been here has like volunteered to do something. That's really great to see that I like don't have to like go down the list most of the time unless I specifically want to. That's really cool. I did get a question in the chat about explaining how I view the natural order. That's a little bit of a trickier subject as I'm not 100% sure myself. But at the end of the meeting today, I will have a very relevant announcement that will let me get into much more detail than I would be able to here with our schedule. But with that little thing out of the way, thank you very much for bringing that up to me in the chat, by the way. Nimra, perhaps you could jump into some ways that you can think of, similar or different to Ethan's idea that we can pressure Canadian politicians to meet targets, kind of like the Green New Deal in the United States, or just like general climate targets.
So I was going to originally like say what Ethan said, and I agree with that point because I know that like it can definitely make a change if we're directly reaching out to them instead of like just talking to the general public. But I know this is like a big step, but definitely some sort of protests would help because I know how that's worked for other topics in the past, like Black Lives Matter, for example. And like we saw a lot of participation in Burlington. So I think, and a lot of people are also compassionate about the environment. And we're also seeing those effects because we just didn't like, we also see that like there wasn't snow until recently. So I feel like we're also personally seeing the effects of climate change and global warming in our own lives. But yeah, I feel like it connects with a lot of people. So a protest would be a good idea. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nimra. So agreeing with Ethan and stating that protests are a great way. I'm seeing a bunch of people in chat. That's a great way to answer the question if we like don't have time to like have everybody speak out. So please go in the chat. I do read all of them, even if I don't call everything out. So I agree with both of you. A little bit about my experience. I find that the staffers within a political office are some of the most powerful people there. And they tend to be a little bit less busy than the politician to whom they serve or have domain over. So reaching out to staff, it's a great way to build up influence within an office. And Nimra, protests are a great point. So in the Kitchener Center district that I'm in, a couple of protesters stormed the building that my MP is located in. I work with my MP, so perhaps I shouldn't officially encourage that, but you don't, so you can officially encourage that. I do see your hand up, Kat. I will reserve you for the next question slot, and you could like kind of add any thoughts that you have for two in the comments. And actually, let me just like take note of that really quickly so I don't forget. And really quickly put these names in bold here. And with that, Efnan and Angela, I've noticed that you two are actually switching. Efnan, are you ready to jump into two? And Angela, are you ready to take some notes? All right, excellent. That is great to see. So whenever you are ready, Efnan, please feel free to jump into it.
Okay. Sunrise is known for how young it is and how powerful it has become in such little time. The organization was born out of the college divestment campaign where student activists forced administrators to divest funds and holdings from fossil fuel firms. Sunrise co-founder and executive director Varshini Prakash led the campaign at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, using marches and sit-ins to achieve this goal. Fellow Sunrise founder Sarah Blazivic and Stephen O'Hanlon, now the group's managing director and spokesperson, helped lead the divestment campaign at Swarthmore campus, while director Diana Jay did the same at the University of Virginia in 2013. Sunrise co-founder and current political director Evan Weber co-wrote the Green New Deal while he was a senior at Wesleyan University. Their project was a reaction to President Barack Obama's climate action plan, which Weber felt was utterly ineffective to solve the climate crisis. He and his co-authors, fellow student Matthew Lichtash, and then visiting professor and environmentalist Michael Dorsey needed an alternate view that was much bolder in nature. The Sunrise campaign has begun to come up with a proposal. What does it really look like to ask for change on the scale that was required and to recommend solutions to the scale of the problem? Weber, 27-year-old, said, the research made several headlines as a dissenting voice opposing the Democratic climate administration. And Weber began to see young people in particular lagging behind their proposals. He met Jay shortly after at the 2014 People's Climate March in New York City. Sunrise's co-founders spent most of 2016 organizing for the election of Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump's emergence has significantly elevated the stakes.
That was excellent, Efnan. I love your energy. So I just really quickly wanted to throw in a pause, not really like a formal discussion, but if any of you have any questions or clarifications that you would like, now would be the time to jump in, just kind of digest all of that information, give a little bit of a break to some very quality reading. And if everybody is comfortable, I will count down from 5 in my head, and then we will jump right back into it after the break, Efnan.
I'll just quickly chime in too, just for what divestment is. So big institutions, they put money into investments to build their capital. It's a great way for big places to make money. So asking people to divest means asking them to stop investing in particular companies like oil and gas, for example.
Thank you, Lily. I will very quickly add that to our summary. Thank you for that. Well, Afnan can perhaps finish off our second meeting. And I'm seeing a message that I will respond to. And with that, Afnan, whenever you are ready, please feel free to jump in after the break.
Okay. The organization publicly initiated a grant of seed capital from the Sierra Club and 350.org in April 2017. But for the first time in the country, Sunrise was declared on 13th November 2018, when 200 of the activists filled an incoming Democratic House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi's office and declined to resign. The demonstrators chanted and yelled in the corridor of the Cannon office block. They weren't calling for climate action. They were demanding for it. They received a high-profile support from the feminist celebrity and elected official Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, D-NY, who stopped by the top 5 and urged them to pursue their work. They stayed for hours long through the police detained 51 of them. Since 2017, the organization has been calling for state and national lawmakers to forego contributors from fossil fuel corporations. It has brought its occupations to state houses around the world, pushing for Green New agreements at the state level. A month after seizing Pelosi's office, Sunrise returned to Congress with 1,000 young people, 5 times the scale of the rally. In September, Sunrise demonstrators joined thousands, maybe millions, of other young people in the global youth climate strikes calling for action on climate change. The global climate attack planned for 20 and 27th September seeks to build on the United Nations Climate Change Summit on the 23rd of September. The demonstrators are being coordinated by a variety of organizations, including Swedish protester Greta Thunberg's Friday for the Future and the U.S. Youth Climate Strike, a campaign headed by Izura Hiri, the 16-year-old daughter of the Democratic Rep. Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. The organization has also carried out electoral work that has paid off, especially in the state and local elections. They and other local advocacy organizations helped nominate progressive legislators to the New York State Legislature who passed the ambitious Environment and Community Security Act. This summer, many considered that legislation to be a roadmap to the Green New Deal. Sunrise caught lightning in a bottle. Many people, particularly Democrats, are increasingly worried about the environment. The Julie Pew Research Center poll found that 84% of Democrats, compared to the Liberal Party of Canada, polled are serious about climate change. Republicans, comparable to the Conservative Party of Canada, are not nearly as worried. But the survey indicates growing climate fear among young Republicans. Global Glossality's survey found that 67% of U.S. Republicans aged 18 to 34 agreed or strongly agreed is causing harm to the earth.
Thank you so much. And sorry about glossalities. I missed that one. I probably could have just said a survey. When we're talking about this organization submitting legislature to the New York State Congress, it would be very, very similar to us here submitting a policy to the government of Ontario with the intention that the government of Ontario will pass that policy. So with that, perhaps, and also there are more than 2 parties in Canada, but the US doesn't have a very far left-leaning party like the NDP, nor is their Green Party really as prominent as ours. Just thought I'd mention those 2 because I didn't in the article. But with that, Kat, and then after that, one other lovely person, could you perhaps get into whether or not you could see yourself in a movement like Sunrise, and if so, what steps you could take to join one, and if not, why you couldn't?
I would say yeah, because like why not? It's a pretty good like cause. But to like for the steps, I would have to see if there's already like a group similar to Sunrise in like my community. And if there isn't, then I would have to ask around and see who else would want to join into a group like that, and then just exchange ideas and see where that would lead to. And yeah, that's my answer.
Bless your face, Kat. That was really good. Yes, why not is the best answer to that question possible. It is a great cause. And as for the second part of your answer, I will be addressing that with the 2 more things bit at the end of the meeting. 2 very interesting announcements that I think everybody's going to like. They've been in my backlog for a while, and I'm very happy that they're finally ready. But with that, would somebody who hasn't had the opportunity to jump in today, Nishida, please feel free to jump in. with
I
your
would
answer?
also join a movement because I think it's important to advocate and stand up for what you believe in. And I would do a similar process as Kat with checking in my community to see what groups I can join in and kind of just expanding outwards if there's nothing in my community that I can.
That is an excellent answer. I have a few articles at the bottom that kind of talk about more local climate organizations and more local calls to action that we'll get in at the end. But again, I have like a very specific point to address both of those things at the end of the meeting. So it is so glad to hear that both of you and hopefully and indeed probably many more friends are. So with that, we have our third reading section with Casey and Iman. Iman, are you ready to jump into the reading for number 3? Thank you so much. And Casey, are you ready to jump into the note taking?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Super, super crispy.
Okay. Okay, sunrise is place in the larger environmental context. As the climate movement is gaining prominence, older parties in the environmental movement are wrestling about just where they have gone wrong with climate change. The campaign has evolved and it's not working. We're losing, said Greenpeace US Executive Director Annie Leonard. Science is better than ever and we're all failing. What's lacking, according to Leonard, is a massive effort to galvanize public opinion around climate change. Older organizations have historically undertaken their own ventures, such as land management, the preservation of endangered animals, or the elimination of plastic bags. None have become as blatantly democratic as Dawn, and few have become willing to give as concise a tagline as the Green New Plan on their proposed climate change solution. The environmental community has started to speak about climate change as an environmental problem, and I think it's really trapped in a lot of ways, said Susan Ruffo, Executive Director of the Circulate Project, who formerly served at Nature Conservancy and Ocean Conservancy. It's all trapped in the box, the classic image of a polar bear. It's a lot more about the future and their futures, and not so much about this is an environmental issue. Sunrise views itself much like the civil rights movement of the 1960s or the Occupy Wall Street demonstrations of 2011 than it did for older environmental movements. It is close to 250.org, the organization created by environmentalist Bill McKibben and a group of college students who are also involved in the divestment movement.
So one thing that I'd really quickly like to add, Iman, I love how you placed like an emphasis on keywords. You're kind of like a natural speaker. And this is one thing that I've noticed for the agenda reader role. It is actually a good jumping off point for me. One of my biggest worries for the agenda reader role was that people were kind of going to be robotic about it, but that has not happened this time. You've all been really, really good, and I feel like you've all gone a long way into developing your public speaking skills, which will be very, very important if you'd like to pursue climate activism, which I hope most of you do. All of this is to say that you have done such a good job. I feel like all of your agenda readings are genuinely contributing something to our project, and the effort that you put into them generally so far has gone above and beyond. So I will be raising them and ultra retroactively, meaning like before today, because the other ones were good too, raising the points for agenda reader up to 5 instead of 1, because you are all doing such a great job with them. But with that, anybody who hasn't had the opportunity to answer other than like the yes or no one, because everybody did a question before, feel free to raise your hand or throw up an emoji or put something in the chat or shout out if you would like to tackle whether or not you believe a civil rights framing fits environmental activism and a little bit about why. And if this is something that people are like perhaps a little bit less familiar with, I see Tanvi, your hand is up there. I think that you could jump in. So please feel free whenever you are ready to do so.
Sure.
Hello there, Nala.
I'm not sure if I completely get the question, but I think what it's asking is that could like a civil rights, like do civil rights include concepts involving the environment?
Oh, okay. Actually, I see exactly what the thing is. It's with the way that I phrased the question. So what I'm more so trying to get at And perhaps this is actually a better opportunity. Like, what I'm really trying to get at is climate change a civil rights issue? Civil. That's actually probably the better way to phrase that. And that might help you with your answer a little bit, Tanvi.
I think like civil rights is really just you're concerning the rights of people and just generally humans. And I think climate change is something that is affecting a lot of people. And even though like we might not be getting affected as large, there are lots of populations who are experiencing really, really huge impacts that I think we might be underestimating. So I think it is something that we need to address, or we should address at least in civil rights issues.
All right. And I have thank you very much, Tanvi. That was an excellent question. And I have another question in the chat saying that they thought I more so meant that could we protest environmental issues as civil rights issues? I would say that the answer to that is probably also yes. And I do have a little bit to say about this question, but with that, is there anybody else who would kind of like to get a little bit more into that? And kind of like whether or not you could see climate change as a civil rights issue and why you think that might be the case. And again, there are no wrong answers here. Everything is helping us kind of build our understanding. So one way that I like to see climate change, and please feel free to jump in, Lily, if you have any ideas as a facilitator, is within the context of environmental justice. So climate change is an issue that affects people disproportionately. And I see a few different hands that are jumping in here. If not, just let me really quickly go up. I believe that Ashley, you have already answered one of these questions. Not that I wouldn't love to hear your answer, please type it in chat. And the last question will be a free-for-all, but I don't believe Efnan has, so feel free to jump in.
I think climate change is a basic right, and it should be a civil right thing. What I mean by that, I mean like laws that are against like root like I think there should be more strict laws against doing bad to the environment, like polluting unnecessarily or littering, that kind of stuff. I feel like it should be more strict and stuff, because even with the fines now, I feel like the punishments should be a little bit more strict and it should be treated like uh a bigger issue.
That is an excellent point, Afton, and both of you touch on very, very, very important things. When you say that climate change is a basic right, I think that what that kind of gets into is that everybody should have the fundamental right to live in a livable environment. And I think that that is indeed a very basic human right. And that we should have stricter laws surrounding harming the environment. That's actually a very, very pertinent, very important issue right now, is that the environment largely is not treated as an entity in and of itself that is protected by law. Most laws involve the human consequences of that. So treating environment as a protected entity in and of itself is a very important way to address climate change. And climate change is indeed something that affects everybody disproportionately. So people who are marginalized, again, we like to talk about intersectionality, are much, much more affected by climate change than people who are privileged through a various of identities, most notably, in my opinion, wealth. The wealthiest elite have very little to fear from climate change. At least they think they do, and this is why they are so slow to address it. Whereas the many, many people who do not have those resources are indeed at great risk. And this is why I believe it could be classified as a civil rights issue. But with that, I do see your hand up, Lily. Always feel free to jump in, like at any time.
Well, I think that this is just such an important part to drive home, and I'm so glad that we're having this discussion today, is that, you know, there is climate justice is definitely deeply intertwined with racial justice, with if we want to think of examples, we think of pipelines. Not my backyard is the theory, and so it goes on Indigenous lands. We think about areas that have been victims of mass pollutions or broken nuclear waste compartments. Disproportionately has affected low income Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. When we even think about what contributes to climate change, fast fashion, the employment situations that people find themselves in because of this consumption and because of this system, it's intricately intertwined with our civil rights and the civil rights of people across the globe. So thank you for putting this discussion point in, Josh.
Thank you, Lily, for bringing up that very important point about Black, Indigenous, and people of color, because when you look at the map of pipelines throughout Canada and the United States, not only do they tend to go through Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, they go through exclusively Black, Indigenous, and communities of people of color. Like, these pipelines perfectly line up with these communities in such a way that it is most definitely intentional. So thank you very much, Lily. And with that, Iman, you were doing an excellent job reading. Perhaps you could jump back into that now and finish off number 3. And I see, Tanvi, that your hand is also up.
Yeah, I can finish up. Okay, it takes time to create movements, McKibben said in an email interview. We've gone from the point where we might mobilize small dispersed marches a decade ago to bring 400,000 people on the streets of New York in 2014 during the People's Climate March, to activities like the Great All-Age Climate Strike happening on September 20th, which I think will be the biggest day of climate action yet. Part of the reason Sunrise has been so successful is how it interacts. This part is critical because Republicans and fossil fuel corporations have effectively muddled the message for years, arguing that climate change has either not existed or has not been man-made. The environmental movement hoped that science would educate the public, but that didn't succeed, partially because scientists aren't the best messengers. They're not really successful, said Leah Stokes, professor of political science at Santa Barbara University of California, who is researching environmental movements. Scientists struggle with uncertainty and caveats. We wanted a spokesperson to suggest that climate change is happening now and to bring it into the media and public consciousness, rather than concentrating on vague or remote stuff like melting ice caps in the Arctic or rising CO2 levels that no one can see. Sunrise potentially focuses on something far more urgent and in some ways selfish. It is home to what climate change is going to do to humanity. I know a very limited number of people who are very optimistic about decarbonization, Prakash told me. What she and her colleagues at Sunrise are seeking to do is their vision to address climate change by massive mobilization and, most notably, the development of green jobs. These are things that people understand intuitively because they apply to their daily lives, Prakash said. I feel like climate campaigners are still disappointed that people don't worry for their problems. The concern is that we don't listen to what people care about. It's not to ignore the work of former conservation organizations who Leonard, executive director of Greenpeace USA, considers formidable. Forests still standing, pesticides banned. The planet is a safer place because Greenpeace did the job, and if we did the same in the next 50 years, we're toast. She said, this isn't enough.
Thank you so much, Iman, for that. So when they say that decarbonization isn't something that people are optimistic about, when I kind of interpret that, it's more so that these abstract scientific concepts that not a lot of people have had the education that they would need to fully understand them, they don't really resonate with people. And that when you are building an effective movement, it's often very important to relate it directly to people's lives and their lived experience, because these are the things that are going to be most important to them and the things that they will most be able to understand. So with that, and this is going to be the last kind of like restricted question where it like has to be people who haven't gone before. The other ones can maybe be more free-for-alls. If you haven't answered a question before, perhaps you could touch on a few elements that you can think of that an effective movement should have. Feel free to raise your hand, shout out in the chat, unmute yourself, or put up an emoji.
Yeah, I guess there are a bunch of elements that really need to be applied. Well, first of all, having a goal, having a mission statement, like something that that you are promoting or pushing for to happen, as well as support within communities and, other people who will support you to create a group to push your message further.
That is an excellent point, Iman, and that kind of captures like all of the kind of basic things that a movement needs if it is going to get off of the ground. Having a goal, a mission statement, or a purpose, and like something specific that we're promoting or pushing for that people can rally behind, and a supportive network of people. And we'll get into that perhaps at the end of the meeting too, or after the end. Really quickly, is anybody else not able to see the screen shared, or did I just do something? Oh wait, no. Never mind, it's back for me. All right, ignore that. Thank you very much, Iman. Is there anybody else who hasn't had the opportunity to answer a question and would like to kind of touch on a few elements that you think that an effective movement should have for that are either similar or perhaps a bit different to Iman's lovely ideas? And thank you so much, Angela. I see that your hand was raised and then went down. That might have been an accident. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah, okay. So I think that some elements that the people in the movement would need to have are just motivation and perseverance, because you need to keep fighting for what you believe in, and you need that motivation factor to keep pushing. And yeah.
That is an excellent point, Angela. And the article, like kind of as it goes on, talks a little bit about that. So we'll get into that very point with 4 and 5. But with that, as we move on, if there aren't any more questions, Tanvi, are you ready to read? And Iman, are you ready to return to the role of note taker?
Yes.
Tremendous. Thank you so much. And Tanvi, are you ready?
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. So feel free to jump into number 4 whenever you're ready.
Okay. Number 4, Sunrise has a powerful plan. Sunrise has been championing the Eco New contract for the past year. Although the distinction between throwing out the boldest idea and then passing on everything that Democrats and Republicans, or even liberal and moderate Democrats, can compromise on, is two entirely separate things. The Green New Deal, as it stands, is a broad structure rather than a single piece of legislation. It seeks to make the United Nations carbon-free by 2030, rendering it a world leader in clean energy on the road. It is no coincidence that the Green New Deal derives its name from Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. It will lead to a massive restructuring of the U.S. economy, pushing for everything from making both residential and industrial building energy efficient to decarbonizing large factories and utilities. It seeks to build millions of jobs in the process, a core component of the strategy that Sunrise leaders hope would improve their chances among moderates and Republicans. Yet Sunrise hopes that the Eco New Deal will rest on all that is going well for Democrats in 2020. Democrats will have to retain the White House, hold the Congress, and win the Senate, where they will then have to succeed by a wide majority or remove the filibuster to push big pieces of legislation through. I believe it is possible to get the climate change bills completed, said former Democratic leader of the Senate, Harry Reid, who favors the elimination of the filibuster. If we have a Democratic Congress and a president, that's going to make things a lot smoother, and that's an understatement. In other words, it helps to have allies in the government.
Thank you very much, Tanvi. So to kind of sum up their plan, what they would like to do is ally themselves with one of the two parties, the Democratic Party, and they would like to pressure Democratic politicians to adopt the Green New Deal, help the politicians that they've allied with win, and then pass through that legislation. So make allies, get them on board with your climate policy, and then help them pass that climate policy against parties that would not support it. So with that, and this is open to absolutely anybody, we're a bit short for time, I also cut some content. Would anybody like to kind of say what they kind of think of this plan, and if there's anything that you'd like to add that's either related to getting politician allies on your side or kind of outside of that? And this question is kind of open to everybody, but if we don't have anything to add for time, I might be inclined to hold a vote. If everybody could put a thumbs up emoji, if you would be okay with moving on to the next section of 5, I would be, but please feel free to jump in. So I guess with that, I'll add a few of my thoughts on this idea. I think that it's definitely important to get political allies on your side, but also important to work outside of the political sphere to build grassroots community organizations. And thank you so much. I see, Tanvi, that your hand is up too.
Yeah, I think like networking is a very powerful tool. So if you can, like, I don't think, obviously there's like, you can network with a lot of different types of people. And so I think it's good to reach out and make connections that can like just help you further reach your goal. So I think it's a good way, it's a nice idea for them to network and try and like, expand their reach.
Thank you, Tanvi. And thank you very much, Iman, for noting that all down. With that, I think that we might be ready to move into the second part of section 4. So feel free to finish it off, Iman and Tanvi, whenever y'all are ready.
Okay. Number 4 continued. Activists are under no impression that they'll get everything they want, but must act like they will. There are a lot of Democratic Congresspeople who are content to take vague and surface level climate action and are more concerned with passing a compromise plan that Republicans should bring on board. And even the most moderate climate Republicans view the Green New Deal as a pipe dream. Former South Carolina Rep. Bob Ingres states, "We are grateful to Sunrise for raising the salience of the issue, but it is important that conservatives understand the message of climate change in their own voice, rather than the language of the left, since it is a very different language." Bob created Republican, a Republican climate change organization seeking to convince the GOP to move on climate change. It's the vocabulary of scarcity, it's doing less. This is a left-wing moralistic message, and we're talking about the energy abundance and the ability of the free market mechanism to produce creativity. We're far from understanding when these conversations will really take place. If Donald Trump is re-elected in 2020, they're definitely not. But Sunrise is pending for an alternate situation, continuing to require Congress members by any means possible. Sunrise is meant to keep doing as it does. It's not their job to be fair and maintain favor with the Stokes Republican officials.
I think Stokes may have been a typo. I think I meant to put United States. Thank you so much for that, Tanvi. So essentially what that is kind of getting into is that even if you probably are not going to succeed with a Republican congressperson, this guy was at least willing to hear them out. And if Donald Trump loses, which he did, he might even be a future ally, even if he's not really on the same page yet. So along those lines, is it important to try even if you don't know you'll succeed? And with that, Tanvi, you can feel free to answer.
I really like this question because I try and like reply, but I think it's just important that I like as a person myself, I would rather know that I tried than give up. So like at least I put in my best effort, and even if I didn't succeed, like maybe I took one tiny step towards my goal or some way. So I just think it's just like important that you work hard and you try your best, even if you're not getting where you want to in the first try.
That is an excellent point, Tanvi. I think that like it's kind of our like fundamental human responsibility to like try and make the world a better place. And as long as we're honestly trying our best, we really can do no wrong. And in the chat here, perhaps Iman, you could also note down some of this quality content. That Casey is saying that yes, because you never know. And if you don't know the answer, you always know that if you try, you still could succeed, and indeed may win a victory that you didn't expect, in a way that you didn't expect. So thank you all so much. And I guess one like way that I could tie that back in the case of the Republican Bob Ingres, kind of like trying to reach out to him and get him on board with future climate policy. He might not pass the Green New Deal, which he should, but he might go a little bit easier on climate activists and might be willing to hear people out, especially if he feels his side is losing and is in need of votes. So it's still sometimes good to subtly get people thinking who may not be on your side. Anyways, with that, We have our final section for today. I know that we're getting very close to 5:30, so if you have to leave at then specifically, please feel free to. But with that, Nishida, are you ready to read? And Kat, are you ready to note take? And also, thank you very much, Candy, for reading, and Iman for doing an excellent job note taking, as always.
On pessimism, optimism, and darkness before dawn, a number of Sunrise participants speak about the idea of dread or nihilism,
Which is like the philosophy of nothing matters. Sorry, should have included that in.
The feeling that things are terrible and will not get any better for the younger generations. That covers a lot of items, including student loan debt and the failure to save money to purchase a home. But the climate crisis is a large part of it. Joanna Zhu, one of the DC House activists, is telling me about a grime joke circulated among her friends. She doesn't have a 401k. She's just counting on the apocalypse to take me down too. So essentially, Sunrise is a group of young people searching for a way to do something. Though they've easily been smart, we're students, not veteran and activists. Many American representatives were turning up for the first time. Weber, Sunrise's political officer, told reporters, "They're young people who are all sort of freaked out about the climate change and the political moment we're in. Sunrise's name refers to the impression that the night is still longer than the dawn of the new day. The youth are afraid, but they are hopeful too. About every Sunrise member of the DC House has a tale about the environment has significantly marked their lives. Manas grew up in Palm City, Florida, which had a back-to-back Category 3 and 4 hurricanes while she was in 4th grade. When one of the storms struck, she and her sister took inner tubes and rolled down the streets like water parks. They were lucky. Their house was still standing, she told reporters. Gabby Pierce recalls that earthquakes that began in her hometown of Wichita, Kansas, when oil and gas companies began to crack there. Wichita is the home base of Koch Industries. Kansas has never had any earthquakes, but when she was 14 to 15, that was the moment I felt my first earthquake in Kansas, she said. A couple of years back, after she moved to California, she saw the wildfires around Los Angeles and the clouds of smoke rolling over the mountains. She could smell the smoke in the air. Everyone was walking by the mass, Pierce said. It was apocalyptic, dimming out the heat. It was Gallo who summoned up why they were all in DC, collaborating with Sunrise.
If it's important, you can feel free to take that.
My screen just went. Oh, I lost the screen.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, it's back now. Sorry about that.
All good.
It was Gallo who summoned up why they were all in DC, collaborating with Sunrise. If he weren't involved, he wouldn't know how to live with myself.
And with that, whoops, I should have put himself. So with that, I would like to end today off on how we can stay optimistic. But before 5:35, to get in a few very important messages, we will save this discussion question perhaps for the end. Thank you very much, Nishida, for that reading. As long as, of course, that is okay with you, Kat, as a note taker. All right, I'm seeing a thumbs up. I'll try to keep this quick. So really quickly here, perhaps we could now go down to our weekly tasks and talk just a little bit about that. There are some summary points that you can feel free to read on your own time, and also the source for this kind of article that I've put together. So the weekly media piece, and this is going to be due not next week, but the week after, and this is the only thing here that is going to have a hard deadline, because having it in for this day is going to be super, super important for a successful meeting. And this will have some knock-on effects for myself and Lily, and also for the people who will be attending. The more calls they get, the more likely they will be to take action. So The topic here is going to be, what do we want to see done in our community? And there are a few helpful links. I've noted them, things that you can do now, and also calls to action for leaders. So this will be the topic. The goal will be to hand it in a Google Doc in the classroom, usual way, or through email if you cannot do classroom. But basically, to come up with one or more specific and relevant calls to action of what you would like to see done in the Halton community for community leaders. And it can be based on these helpful links of things that you can do now, or some of these calls to action here. Or of course, your own research. I just wanted to provide that to save you a little bit of time because I know that people are busy. And with that, perhaps, Lily, we could get into two more things. So for the longest time, I've wanted an opportunity to kind of talk with like a little bit less of a time limit and to like kind of give a more open opportunity for some like more casual and like genuine discussion rather than the like more kind of like formatted and kind of like agenda focus here. So I've cordoned off my Saturday, or set it aside, for a Saturday from 1:30 to 2 p.m. chill meeting, although I will be free to stay a bit after that, with no agenda to cover stuff that we couldn't for time. There was a question about the natural order here. That's a great place to do that. And I have already seen some interest from a few people on Classroom. I can't wait to see you there this Saturday from 1:30 to 2 p.m. I changed it from Sunday because everybody does meetings on Sundays, and I actually have a board meeting on Sunday. So again, a chill meeting for people who either missed the meeting or who kind of want to like catch up with me and like talk about things that we couldn't really cover as much as we wanted to throughout the meeting. And I will be posting a link for that no later than 24 hours before the event with our usual Zoom link. But I'll just like send out a little reminder. And with that, I'd like to talk a little bit more about something. So I've been thinking of doing a sustainability group chat on Instagram. And the purpose would be to kind of create a base for the groundwork of organized and focused environmental activism in the Halton region. So I'm wondering if anybody would be interested in that. And the goal would be to kind of like, in the same way that the Sunrise people started talking to each other, this would be a great way for us to talk to each other outside of like this more structured environment. So would anybody be interested in a sustainability group chat that I will create and that Lily can join? All right. So I'm seeing that Iman here, another message unrelated and a new message that somebody is interested. But that is something to think about. I will also be posting an announcement for that. I'm seeing a few thumbs up here. Thank you so much, Canvy. And this is, again, a great way to kind of like talk to like-minded people and start to like build the community networks that we need with each other to actually put the change out in the world. And as an example of how this works, back in my city of Kitchener, I put together a group of politically oriented people that I think one of you asked me to be a part of. And basically the goal is like to create a group chat where you can coordinate action. So we put up a post in our story to pressure the environment minister of Ontario to kind of like take action on $3 billion dollars. That's a bit of a more partisan thing. This would be a party neutral thing. We would not be loyal to any one political party. Our only loyalty would be the environment, and that would be the only focus of this chat. And also to generally provide support for each other, because that's nice. But with that, perhaps we could get into how we can stay optimistic. And I have one message to end us off on. But if there are two people, and I say two only to respect Kat's very generous time as our note taker here, of ways that you can think of to stay optimistic in difficult situations like climate change. And anybody can feel free to jump in. And these can be big ways or small ways. There are no wrong answers. All right. I see Tanvi, your hand up, so feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'm back again. I think just like I was talking about before, we just have to try our best. And really put a conscious effort to do whatever we can.
That is an excellent point, Tanvi. So as long as you try your best and put a conscious effort in, you always have the right to feel good about yourself and to feel optimistic because you are genuinely trying your best. So with that, do we have anybody else who would like to weigh in before I give like a short 30-second speech? on kind of my take.
Yeah, sure. Kind of just believing and having hope that things will work out in the end, even though it's hard. And I guess also talking to other people about it if you are kind of pessimistic about these situations, because it can really help your mindset.
Thank you, Iman. That was excellent. So believing and having hope that things will work out in the end, talking to other people is super important. Like if you're ever nervous about something, studies have shown time and time again that just talking to other people, that simple act, can make you feel so much better. And I see Casey in the chat saying that it's good to focus on things that make us feel better, or that we are thankful for, rather. Focus on things that we are thankful for. So my take here, and this gets into what I was saying about the natural order last meeting, and also a question that I got. So when I talk about the natural order, I am not talking about any piece of paper, nor am I talking about any magical force. I believe that it was influenced by the creator. But when I talk about the natural order as it relates to humans, I'm going to focus it in on us. I basically refer to the evolutionary processes that have happened over the course of billions of years of interacting with our environment, not as humans, but as other species that came before humans. And these interactions with our shared ecology that essentially form the basis of like why we act the way we do, like why we feel happy about certain things, why we feel sad about certain things. It's kind of all linked back to our relationship with our shared ecology and how we evolved to survive. And if you'd like to put a religious significance onto that, you are more than happy to. There are many, many interesting stories there. But it's kind of just about like how and why we act the way we do. And what does that have to do with the natural order? And what does that have to do with climate change? It is a very fundamental thing. 99% of people experience this. To want to be good to other people, that is what is best for us. It is best to us if we can be good to other people and build a network of people who genuinely care about each other, so that if you are ever in trouble, you are never reduced to only your resources. You have everybody else to fall back on, and they have you to fall back on. Now, the economic order that we're currently under right now doesn't really work like that. All corporations have a legal responsibility to act only in their self-interest. And the people who are at the top of these corporations, they live that. They live this. This is how they live their lives. So at the very top of our society, the people who mainly organize things, there are exceptions, of course, but mostly speaking, are really only interested in self-interest. And this is actually, it's a human quality to be self-interested, but the level to which these organizations are self-interested is not really a human quality, because it starts to become counterintuitive. So for example, in a Haudenosaunee village, I'll use my own people. If there was one guy, everybody participates to make a soup for the village, and then one guy comes in and drinks all of the soup, we would kick him out of the village for a while. Everybody put their effort into that soup. Everybody deserves to enjoy the joy of that soup together. And you can think of this kind of like how we produce things for the companies that we work for, and how the people at the top are kind of like that one guy who is always drinking the soup. And that's like fundamentally not really a very like human thing to want to take everything for yourself. Most people want to like give things to each other. Most people want to be good. And this is why I am very optimistic about the situation that we are in, because good people are by far, and I mean by far, the vast majority. So all of the social justice that we are seeing, the environmental justice that we need, the Black Lives Matter movement, which is the result of movements that have been going on for hundreds of years, ever since colonialism was a thing. This is all a very human and very natural reaction to the injustices that people have been put under. The injustices that have been inflicted onto people by the powerful. It is a very natural and human reaction for the majority of good people to lash out and to want to fix the system and eventually come together to fix the system. So hopefully that clarified a little bit about natural order. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them this Saturday from 1:30 to 2 p.m. or after our meeting, which will conclude now only 5 minutes late. Sorry about that. You are all free to go. Anybody is welcome to stay after the meeting, especially if you've already asked.